Yeah, morning everyone. Today we are going to be doing a piece on the current stance that our Department of Environment has on the lion bone quota that's been put forward and in fact been approved. 800 skeletons per annum for export to Asia. It does boggle the mind as to why this proposal has been approved and is going forward, despite NGOs and organizations protesting and giving valid reasons for why it should not go ahead. Certainly some due diligence should have been done before. I have with me today Meg and Amy, so we can treat it as a hashtag Ask Meg. First things first, we need to explain to everyone the listing of lions on the endangered species listings. On the IUCN Red Data Species List, lions are classified as vulnerable. That's one classification away from endangered, and then obviously from there on it would be critically endangered. But they are vulnerable to extinction. And then on the CITES listing, which is the Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species, lions are Appendix 2, which means trade is allowable, but it must be shown to have a non-detrimental effect on wild specimens. And for those of you who don't know, lion numbers are sitting in the region of between 15 and 20,000 in number. That is throughout Africa, and then there is a small Asiatic population in the Gir forest in India, totaling approximately 550 odd individuals. Lions are extinct in North Africa. The Moroccan lion is gone. In West Africa and Central Africa, very highly or critically endangered. We see that lion numbers in East Africa and the surrounds are plummeting at an alarming rate. What we find in South Africa, the numbers of lions seem to be relatively stable, if not on the increase. We're sitting with a population of wild managed and wild lions of in and around 2,300 odd. And in fact there is movement in South Africa, believe it or not, to delist lions down to least concern. That's a bit of a worry anyway, because that just sends a bad message, because people can't really draw the line between South Africa South Africa and the rest of Africa. What's the difference between a wild lion and a wild managed lion? A wild managed lion is like what we have here in Endangered, where the lions are free roaming. However, there is extensive management of the population by means of contraception or sell-off, so that the population is controlled or managed. Wild lions are lions really left to their own devices, such as in the Kruger Park. Okay, so kind of got a handle on lions, the numbers. And then obviously we're sitting with a situation of captive populations, whereby there's estimates of between 6,000 and 7,000 lions in captivity. Why that number is so vague is beyond me. In my sanctuary I have 30 lions. It's very easy because I can count them, and I let nature conservation know that I have 30 lions, and therefore it should be a simple task of tallying up all the 200 odd breeding facilities around the country and saying, well guys, we have exactly 6,242 lions, or whatever that number may be. Compliance and the enforcement of the law. We have issues surrounding the workforce of conservation officials, so the numbers of people able to actually physically go out and enforce the law. and secondly also the welfare organizations are also limited in their resources and capacity. So even to see that these 6,000 to 7,000 captive bred animals are looked after properly is a very difficult task. And why I mention that is because welfare is a big issue when it comes to the lion bone quota, and obviously the well-being of lions in captivity. Let me give you a bit of history into the trade in lion bone. Until 2008, I hadn't really heard of any demand for lion bone or the exploitation of lion bone from South Africa. In 2007, CITES proposed a ban on tiger bone trade in tiger bone farming. The finding and the reason for the ban was because it was shown to have a harmful or detrimental effect on wild tiger populations. We see, coincidentally with that, comes an increase in the exploitation of lion bone and an increase for its demand in Asia. So year on year from 2008, suddenly we see lion bone being exported from South Africa, year on year increasing. And one asks the question why? Well, obviously there's now no supply, or less supply from the tiger bone farm, so lion bone is a good substitute, and in fact very, very hard to tell the difference between lion and tiger bone. In fact, you'd have to be pretty much an expert to do so. I cannot. So we can understand now why there's a demand for lion bone. It's either mislabeled as tiger bone, or it's shown to be an alternative for tiger bone. How is it consumed? Because that's the next question I suppose people have been asking, is, well, what on earth are people doing with lion bone? It's used in lion bone cake. It's used in also the wine, lion bone wine, and a skeleton would be used as in traditional Asian medicine, from curing anything from a hangover, even thought to have been contributing in curing cancer. It's also now been shown to be seen as a status symbol, utilized as a party drug and or a gain favor kind of thing to have if you want to influence somebody in the business world or politically. You give them some lion bone or tiger bone, and that stands you in good stead. So in South Africa we have over 200 breeders of lion, and the canned hunting industry is rife and rampant, and we have, just to summarize that, the breeding of lions in captivity for the utilization in cub petting facilities, so tourists can come from around the world and interact with lion cubs, which then later on are utilized for lion walks, and then ultimately when they grow up and become dangerous to these facilities, get passed on or shipped on to other organizations that either use them and keep them for breeding, or they'll end up being shot in the canned hunting industry, and ultimately then make their way into the lion bone trade, because there's now that demand. That's the life cycle of a lion. There will be organizations that argue that the selling of bone of captive lions takes the pressure off the wild lions. We've seen that this is not the case with the tiger bone farming. If it was a successful endeavor, and the breeding of tigers in captive situations took the pressure off wild tigers, surely CITES would not have banned it. And then the second thing is that there's evidence now supporting the increase in wild lion poachings. It is thought that wild lion bone is more potent than a captive specimen. We've seen poaching incidents in areas such as the Caprivi, lions being poisoned and their body parts being taken, heads being chopped off, paws, tails, teeth. And the same in Nyasa in northern Mozambique, and also in Limpopo National Park. A lot of the lions that have been poached have been dismembered in that way. One would have thought that that is enough evidence to support or suggest that certainly the lion bone trade is influencing poaching of wild populations. Last year, IUCN held a conference in Hawaii, and there was a motion passed, 009. It was held that the captive breeding of lions in the canned hunting industry was deplorable, despicable, and had a detrimental effect, and it was unanimously agreed that the industry should be brought under control and phased out. That conference was held before COP17, which is the CITES convention in Johannesburg last year. There was a lot of hope that lions would be listed on a CITES Appendix 1, which would then ban the trade, stop the trade, and this did not happen. In fact, what was put forward was a proposal that there was a quota on lion bone that was to be determined. It was a quota of lion bone only from captive specimens, not from wild, and in the months to come that would be put forward to CITES, but the South African National Institute for Biodiversity came up with a figure of 800 skeletons, and despite numerous non-governmental organizations and other institutions stating facts as to why this should be put on hold indefinitely until further research was done, despite that 800, a number of 800 was proposed this past week. It was passed by the Department of Environmental Affairs in South Africa. There are obviously a number of organizations that are against the exportation of lion skeletons, but equally there are also organizations that are for it. Obviously the Department of Environmental Affairs in South Africa seems to be one of those, and secondly the predator breeders of Association of South Africa, or SAPA, is obviously also pro the trade. They argue that it takes pressure off wild populations. I think we've addressed that, and certainly if evidence is anecdotal, then surely one would be more prudent to implement such research before making such a finding. You know, we don't want to be conducting experiments with our lion population. You know, from my perspective, the money that is being generated, let's say between $1,500 and $2,000 a skeleton, one can't argue that that is the motivation and that there's a lot of money that stands to be made. It's certainly not a lot of money in the context of the risks that are there. It would be, in my view, more prudent to conduct experimentations going forward as to see if this finding would be detrimental or not. Let's face it, the main objective of breeding predators is for monetary gain. Because of the public outcry, there has been a shift now for a lot of predator breeders to start aligning themselves with conservation causes and to say, well, we are breeding up numbers to be able to repopulate, and in fact there are some programs that are even being implemented to reintroduce captive bred specimens into the wild. But if one analyzes it, it's not the main purpose. Most of these places' main purpose is business and to make money. One cannot just make a statement that we believe if we don't allow 800 skeletons to be supplied, people are merely going to poach them. Then the other issue, coupled with the stance of the predator breeders, is that that's all very well and good, breeding lines to take pressure, so to speak, off wild populations, but guys, there's also things called welfare issues that come into consideration. In recent years, the keeping of lions and the welfare is much to be desired. There's been numerous exposés on farmers who just are keeping their lions in substandard conditions. If you're a breeding facility trying to attract tourism, then obviously it makes sense for you to keep your lions looking relatively healthy, because the tourists are going to complain very quickly if they see animals that are not looking too healthy. But with now the lion bone trade, you don't even need to worry about that, because all you need to do is speed breed, inbreed, whatever you want to get lions to a certain size. Lions are reaching almost full size in terms of bone length at about 2-3 years of age. So here you're raising all sorts of issues and concerns about the welfare that these lions are going to face, that may be bred purely just for the lion bone trade. And then when these organizations say, well, this can be managed, people need to police it, and better regulations and better compliance, it goes back to what I mentioned in the beginning, that there simply isn't enough law enforcement officers to ensure that these facilities are complying. And then just tackling the point whereby people say, well, how on earth are you going to determine whether those bones for sale are from a wild lion or from a captive lion? And that's a good question and a good point. And what Sandy's answer to that was that they would implement DNA testing, and there would be all these systems, checks and balances in place. But again, we go back to the reality of how plausible is that. It's all very well having the regulations there, but if there's no compliance because of corruption and bribery, then how on earth is one going to determine whether lion bones come from a captive bred lion or a wild lion? The other thing to realize is that the decision that we make in South Africa have potentially negative knock-on consequences to lions throughout Africa. And it's something I've raised many times, is we owe it to the African lion, not just in South Africa, we owe it to the African lion to put regulations in place that are non-detrimental not only to our lions but to lions throughout Africa and Asia. There's many loopholes in the current lion legislation. One of them is stating that the lions need to be hunted in an area whereby they could be self-sustaining. It doesn't say they have to be self-sustaining. The lion could potentially be kept in a very small enclosure all its life, and then on the day of the hunt be released into an area whereby a lion could be self-sustaining and therefore be hunted there. That's not really the issue that I have. We're not talking about hunting necessarily. Yes, the byproduct or the spin-off of a lion hunt can be the bones, but what is to stop a breeder from breeding, raising animals to a certain age, simply euthanizing and then exporting? Therein lies an issue. It raises major concerns for people who actually can supply lions, for example, to the petting industry, then the walk-in industry, and then those lions can then be euthanized legally and supplied to the lion bone trade. So it's opening up a new kind of business model. There's been a lot of public outcry over the trophy hunting industry. So, you know, if we see a decline in that, this is just another loophole or another invitation to start a new type of business. Okay, just carrying on, we're going to just tackle some of the statements that the Department of Environmental Affairs made, the DEA, and they quite correctly stated that there are a number of issues facing potentially the lion populations, both wild and captive, should this 800 skeleton proposal be put forward, which now it has. The department seems to be pro the breeding of lions, of captive lions, for the supply of the lion bone trade and also canned hunting. One thing they say is, for example, that there's no evidence to suggest that the lion bone skeleton quota will have any detrimental impact on the wild lion population. But by the same vein, there's also no evidence to support the fact that there won't be, and it should stand to reason that it should go both ways. It doesn't hold water when you say it one-sidedly. You need to come at it from both angles and say, well, it hasn't shown to have a detrimental effect, but it also hasn't shown to not have a detrimental effect, and until such time as we can make an informed decision, we should err on the side of caution. The other thing that the DA has come up with is that legally it's not possible to ban the hunting. Coupled with that is the better regulation of captive breeding, and why there's been no effort made to clamp down on this, because if regulations were made more stringent, this would certainly make it obviously more difficult for people to get permits, and this would dissuade certain individuals from getting into the industry. There's certainly no reason why they can't make those regulations more watertight and implement them on a more national level, with the provincial departments being able to make those regulations stricter. And one last thing before I stop with my rant is a question that I posed to the department when we had the interested and affected stakeholder meetings, and we were asked to put forward comment, which I did. One of the things that I put forward, which is a simple thing to actually do but was never even considered, is why the department in each province, or why there wasn't a mandate issued that said before we even consider or talk exportation, why could they have not issued a statement or a ruling saying that until such time as all facilities comply, there will be no consideration as to the exportation of lion bone. And by comply, what I mean is that if you're a facility in South Africa keeping lion, your obligation is through your department that you fall under. For me, it's in the Gauteng province. That's the GDOT is my department. It's the onus lies or rests with me to contact them and say to them, hey guys, I have 15 male lions, here are their microchip numbers, and I have 15 female lions, and these are their microchip numbers. You are more than welcome to come and verify that what I'm telling you is correct and put it on an affidavit or whatever. Get everyone to comply. Then get an understanding or a take on what we are actually talking about in terms of the numbers, and then start to implement the measures in place to make sure that the animals being kept in captivity meet certain living criteria. That would certainly take a period of time. In that time, while that's taking place and people are complying, let's say a year to 2 years, it would have given the department ample opportunity to do more, conduct more research into the potential effects of exporting skeletons on wild populations, which now incidentally they are starting to conduct. Certainly in a logical mind, one would beg the question, why is there this rush to propose a quota? And certainly, how does one even begin to come up with a number of 800 when one doesn't have such ease of access to that information, considering that the numbers of the CITES export permits don't align with the provincial department numbers of permits issued. So guys, yeah, I hope you pinpoint that. As I always talk these things through, and I start to realize, yeah, I'm just rambling and it's just lots and lots of information. It makes one realize, yes, it's a very complicated issue. There's two sides, but one has to take a balanced approach on it and weigh it up. And certainly I think at this point in time that hasn't happened. Again, it's my opinion, but I think I'm backed up by a lot of other organizations out there. I think awareness is key. You guys watching this video have the opportunity to get involved, and by which I mean get involved, just share the videos. Education is key. Awareness is key. If the world can let South Africa know that, hey guys, we're not happy with what you're doing, that is a way of making change. Subscribe and share. The other way to keep up to date is to follow us on Twitter, LionWhispererTV. It's the same handle for Instagram, and obviously Facebook as well. So thanks for watching. It has been interesting. If I've left something out, please forgive me. There's probably many other things when people are watching are going to go, hey, what about this or what about that? Please do put those questions on the channel. The guys will get them to me in some shape or form, and I'll try and answer them next time when we take a walk with Meg and Amy. Okay, so next time guys, till then, ciao from me, Amy, Meggie. Come Meg.